Context is really important. In real life, in movies, in books, I'm one of the few people that really loves the movie Tenet, and even I'll tell you that when you take a deeper look at it, the story is kind of goofy.
Don't try to understand it.
But you know what it does have? The vibes. Or as the intellectuals call it, the atmosphere. Specifically in video games, where every action you take affects the world around you, I think there's an argument to be made that atmosphere might actually matter more than the story. One game that really highlights this duel of forces is Bioshock. I played Bioshock the day it came out because it was maybe the only game that my dad ever pre-ordered. He even got one of those Prima strategy guide things you can get from GameStop. Pretty much immediately, it cemented itself in my brain as one of those games that I'd be comparing every other game to for the rest of my life. And while I vaguely remember the story, the atmosphere is locked in my brain. That being said, I haven't played this game in over a decade and a half, so I'm using this as an excuse to go back and play it again. I'm downloading the game as we speak, but there are two things I want to focus on as we play it. One, how do they make the atmosphere so memorable and so iconic? And then two, how much does the story play a factor in my personal enjoyment of the game? These two things together will help us determine whether or not a theory I have is real or batshit. So let's find out. Okay, so now that we're in the fancy floating boy part of the video, let me clarify a few things. One, of course there's no way to know exactly which is more important between atmosphere and story. I just want to give our boy Atmosphere a little bit more of the credit than I feel like he's been given before. Two, maybe the old garage version of me was wrong. Right when I got back into the game, I knew exactly what was happening with the story. It was completely memorable. And the story does provide you with something unbelievably essential, but in the most clickbaity style possible. I'm going to have to tell you about that later. And number three, which is why the Venn diagram, a lot of the atmosphere elements contribute to the story and vice versa. I do think there are a lot of elements that are more about enhancing the vibe than they are about enhancing the story, but the crossover, pretty large. I say all that to say, there may be some atmospheric elements that I talk about that are crucial to the story, but this video is about the vibes, so we're talking about the vibes. Talking about the vibes, let's start at the beginning. If you're just talking about the first 30 minutes of the game, this game is a masterclass on how to exactly instill the vibe you're going for. You start off in a plane crash that drops you right outside this big, like lighthouse-ish tower kind of thing. Once you go inside, there's an elevator, and during the elevator ride, you get to see the beginning of the atmosphere. Mostly what you're seeing is a little city guide tour of Rapture, the underwater city that the game takes place in. The architecture of the city is a clearly 1920s Art Deco vibe, and every little piece of the atmosphere works together in such a way that it makes it feel like one big painting. Something interesting to note is that while you're in this elevator capsule thing, it actually lets you look around, which I think is interesting because, yes, there are a few cutscenes at the beginning of this game, but there are a lot of these atmospheric moments where it just lets you be a part of it. You'll walk upon something happen, and it's clearly something you're supposed to see happen, but you're able to look around and take a moment and just be a part of the environment. So even in this elevator, where it's really just like loading the city, it shows you each and every piece in a way where you get to see, I'm looking, I'm a part of this, I'm not just paused movie. When the elevator stopped, though, I was reminded of something. I think this game might be a horror game. I had kind of forgotten about that, but I just wanted to give you a heads up in case you're a little baby and you're scared. Don't worry, kids. I'll edit out the super scary stuff. The very first thing you see when the capsule stops before you even take a step out into the beautiful world of Rapture is a very scary lady beating the ever-living shit out of some dude. Some of this guy's blood even ends up on the window of the capsule, and I think you hear her footsteps above you. She runs away, and then you hear an ominous voice telling you through a cassette player to find her.
Take a deep breath and step out of the bathysphere. I won't leave you twisting in the wind. We're gonna need to draw her out of hiding, but you're gonna have to trust me.
As you walk around in the beginning, the world begins to reveal itself, and all around you, it's vibes, baby. And by vibes, I mean horrors beyond all imagination. The only signs of life you can find are people who are so addicted to some drug that they're instantly a threat to you. At one point, this place might have been a pleasant place to live, but that charm has been replaced by, at best, pure dilapidation, and at worst, an environment where poor people are pitted against each other. But on my channel, we get extremely pedantically into the details. So let's list off a few of the expert ways they instill this exact vibe. The lights are flickering, and there's a clear mess everywhere you look. The only remaining infrastructure is one of two things, either something that'll bring you back when you die, or something that will find and shoot threats in the environment. The fact that the very first item you find is a wrench that you're supposed to use to fight people with. Neon signs and advertisements depicting some kind of weaponized body enhancement thing. The only thing in this stroller being a handgun. I told you it was a scary game, okay? Some of the most convincing alcohol effects where when you take a drink of whiskey and have to keep walking. These little presentations when you pick up a new item or ability that really reminds me of the Pip-Boy experience from Fallout.
Light up foes to 1,000 degrees. Warning, fire spreads.
Generally, the audio establishes it really well, but one specific example of this is in the cassette tapes you'll find. They're optional to play them, and some of them give context to the story, but most of them just tell you what life was like in Rapture beforehand.
I was at German prison camp, only 16 years old when I realized I have love for science.
Even the fact that the main character, who we know almost nothing about, has a chain tattooed on not one, but both of his wrists. And then saving my favorite for last, the Circus of Values.
Welcome to the Circus of Values!
The vending machine that sells you first aid kits, bullets, and Eve, what you use to shoot lightning out of your wrist. Wait, you want even more specific?
Yeah, that's what we do here.
Okay, we can do that. The Circus of Values. I think even though it's just a vending machine, or a shop interface, if you will, it has 5 things that really drive the point home about what this world is. 1. It's designed in such a way that it looks like an old casino machine. 2, and probably what you saw first, it's got a horrifying clown with a mouth where the speaker is. Which leads me to 3, the sounds, which all kind of work together even though they are intentionally way too loud. Half of it is a music that gives off a kind of chipper, I'm gonna kill you buddy kind of vibe. And the other half is a voice of presumably the clown saying,
Welcome to the Circus of Values!
the fact that what it sells is ammo, first aid kits, Eve, and even vodka. And then lastly, that it's called the Circus of Values. So I think you can understand the vibe they're trying to push pretty easily. Things were, at one point, kind of interesting and stylish, and then evil people stepped in, pitted everyone against each other, and chaos reigned. I'm still talking about Bioshock. I promise. I've been talking about it for
9.5
minutes, and so you understand that. But in a game, it establishes it by just being environmental aspects as you're walking down the corridors. Okay, remember earlier when I said that the story provides you with something essential? Really? I promise I did. Okay, either way, specifically in Bioshock this is the case, but I think a lot of single-player games do it. While the atmosphere can instill a very real desire for exploration, without the story, it can be very easy to get complacent or feel maybe the worst feeling when you're playing a video game, which is bored. A story can provide the player with something to do or an activity to participate in. Back to our underwater example, right when you crash, the only thing you can do is swim, and the only thing you can swim to is a building. So you swim to the building, you get in an elevator, and right when you get off the elevator, the voice tells you, "Hey, can you go find my lost family?" And as they say in the industry, that's story, baby. And it continues from there. You're asked to go to Neptune's bounty, but Neptune's bounty is blocked. The emergency access key is hidden behind a series of puzzles, and all of this is just trying to progress you through the game. All of this is designed to move you forward, but it's also reiterating the narrative fiction they're working on. So in this process of submerging myself again into Bioshock, I learned a few valuable and important lessons. 1. As expected, I was 100% right about the atmosphere here being almost overwhelmingly good. 2. Bioshock actually crushes it in both the atmosphere and the story. It's been a busy few weeks, so I haven't actually been able to beat the game. I plan on it, but I haven't been able to this time around, so I watched a video what happens at the end to see if I remembered it. It all came back the exact same way. Crazy good ending, crazy good story. They knew exactly what they were doing. So my feelings about this are split. On the one hand, I've loved the shit out of this game for a decade and a half, so coming back to find out that it's even better than I remember, awesome. On the other hand, I don't love to be proven wrong. So, instead of talking about how the garage version of me before was wrong, let's see if we can transfer this knowledge to a few other games. In terms of atmosphere versus story, games can have a tendency to lean in one direction to the detriment of the other. I think Bioshock actually leans a little bit in the middle here, but I wanted to give a few examples of excellent games that kind of run the gamut between atmosphere and story. To start with, let's return to Elden Ring. The world of Elden Ring is like Speed in the 1960s. Once you breathe it in for the first time, it's hard for you to walk away. Behind every corner is a new cave you want to explore, and every item makes you a new character with new traits and new abilities. But all of that, for the most part, is atmosphere. I'm not the most observant fella, so this could have been just me, but I think the story is a little bit harder to follow. I do think it's an awesome story, and the lore details are super interesting, but I can only kind of understand that because of Oscar-level documentaries like Vati Vidya. I'm not saying the story here is bad. I'm not personally smart enough to judge a game that harshly. I'm just saying that out of the two, atmosphere takes the cake. On the flip side, another game I adore is the indie puzzle platformer Celeste. I had been following the development of it on Twitter, and at the time I lived in Utah riding a bus to and from work. So the first time I played it was on the bus, on the Switch, with snow falling around me, just raising the vibes to perfection. That being said, I do think that what Celeste does best is the story. Not to give too much away because story's way easier to spoil. The premise is that you're battling your own anxiety and perfectionism while trying to climb this mountain. I don't think the atmosphere here is bad, but it's not what brings you back. The story is what drives your motivation to play this game. And if we throw our horrifying, underwater, demented child into this same diagram, what do we find? A pretty well-oiled symmetry in the departments of atmosphere and storytelling. It's not what I thought I was going to find here, but I'm happy I found it. And I'm happy I found it with you. I say all that to say, if the story in a video game is a little bit lacking, the immersive world building can really pull me in, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So let's give our boy Vibes a little bit more of the credit he deserves and get back to exploring. I'm Old Jackson Boy, and I'll catch you next time.
He forgot to mention it, but please like and subscribe. And if you know somebody that would like this kind of content, send it to them too. Okay. Thanks for watching.